WSOU 89.5 FM, the loudest rock. I'm Valentino, and I'm joined today with Chad Johnson, the founder of Furnace Fest. How are you doing today, Chad?
Yeah, I'm stoked. Any opportunity to talk about Furnace Fest, I still feel like I'm living in a bit of a like, wait a minute, like I have to catch myself. Like, is this for real? So I'm thrilled.
And I have to say again, it's super stoked that the festival's coming back. I know that,
Yeah.
it was in 2000 to 2003, took some time off, was scheduled for 2020 to 2020. And then
Yeah.
obviously with the pandemic got pushed back. What made you kind of get the idea to bring this festival back?
Well, I mean, it's, in all like giving credit where it's due. It's one of the four business partners that are behind Furnace Fest is a friend who was a scene kid growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, when I was running little tiny shows as a promoter. And he was just like, as maybe a 16-year-old, like really excited about the whole world of punk rock and hardcore and emo and all of it. And so I guess for like years now, he's actually been badgering me like, yeah, we should do like a reunion. And I was like, no, dude, nobody cares. Like, it's over. It happened, years ago. And so thankfully, the kind of like nail in the coffin of the conversation was him saying, hey, what about all the people that you might only ever get the chance this one time in life to see again? And it's going to be at Furnace Fest. And it was like, oh man, he played that card on me, dude. And he got me with that one, And so then it's like,
Exactly.
okay, you're right. Let's do it. So I'm so glad though that he brought that up, because it's just, I just feel like it's one of those moments in time that don't I don't even know that I would have recognized it had Johnny, my friend, not like consistently been reminding me like, hey dude, what about this? What about Furnace Fest? Reunion Furnace Fest. So here we are.
And
Thank
you
you, Johnny.
mentioned, thank you, Johnny. We all
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. We love you, Johnny.
and you mentioned like the reunion, and I gotta be honest, like when I saw like bands like Mineral were playing the Furnace Fest
Yeah.
lineup, I kind of had to double take. I was like, wait, no way, really?
Yeah.
Blew my mind. You got like, Anne Berlin also coming back. You have like a lot of bands that are, you're right, kind of almost like reuniting for the sake of this festival, which is kind of really a
Yeah.
cool thing to see.
No, the Mineral and Amber Lynn's and all of that was very intentional. I think for us, we didn't want to just come back and be like, hey, this we know this was special for all of us 20 years ago or 17 years ago, but now it's like 2021. So here's all the cool new bands that everybody loves. It really was, we've got to start with all of those bands that helped make Furnace Fest what it was, or bands like Mineral that we wished would have been a part of the original Furnace Fest. And so that was very, I mean, like you, when Mineral was like, we'll do it, it was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? It's like, what world am I alive in right now? This is insane.
That is so
Yeah,
awesome.
I know I feel like I'm still just like pinching myself, like, wait, this is otherworldly.
And you have a lot of bands like from the original Furnace Fest lineup back in like 2002, 2003, bands like Taking Back Sunday, Andrew WK, Under Oath coming back, and like, it feels so comforting to see, because it's like a grand return. It really, it feels like the festival is again back in full swing.
Yeah, man. And it's that too was kind of, I guess I would argue, one of the rare benefits of COVID was that we were actually given and kind of like an extra allotment of time so that we could add a third stage, and we could bring in all these other bands that we would have loved to have included from the start, but we weren't quite there in terms of what we were able to build. And so once we realized that people were considerably more excited about Furnace Fest than I gave them credit for, it was like, okay, we can kind of take this next step and add in a bunch of other friends and bands that we hadn't originally thought would work. And so it's crazy. Like right now we've been talking to Under Oath about some stage ideas, and and it's like the feeling of excitement is palpable. Like I can, in the text messages, in the emails, it's just, I can feel it. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
this is gonna be nuts. And of course, to also, I guess, maybe address the elephant in the room. Like COVID is unfortunately not just gone. And I think especially for those of us living in the South, I'm in Nashville. I mean, it's really, if anything, it's just frustrating, and like sad that, like, wait, we're doing so well. Everyone's rolling up sleeves, let's
Yeah.
do this, and let's take a hit for the country, and then to all of a sudden kind of feel like this, oh wait, like we've got like this like growing, what feels like a pandemic for the unvaccinated, where once upon a time I thought Alabama's the perfect state for a punk rock festival, because they're a red state, and they're not going to care, like it's all good, like whatever. And then of course this is like this was me and my really naive perspective, not early on in the COVID days, not realizing what this really was, or what it was capable of doing. And so then to now kind of like come full circle and realize that man, this is a red state, which in so many ways has also brought about this challenge, kind of added challenge of who do we trust, what media outlets do we trust, what happens down here maybe isn't what happens everywhere else. And so it's been very, yeah, it's been very challenging, but also really encouraging today actually to see that we're 50%, as a country, we're 50% vaccinated. And that the rates, I think today there's 555,000 new people as of yesterday that signed up to get vaccinated. Like that's, to see states like Alabama that are like doubling in their vaccination rates. And I think just, there's like a sort of almost like a day of reckoning, like, dude, this is real, and we can actually all come together and like fight this thing. And so it's a bit of a bittersweet season right now, because it was all like, this is amazing, like through the roof, and it still is, but now it's kind of like, well, do we require masks again? Do we require everyone to be vaccinated? Furnace Fest is all outdoors, so in some ways it's like there is that benefit that we're not also dealing with what do we do with an large indoor crowd. But still, it's just a lot of, I've probably lost sleep a little more than I've wanted to in recent days, and really just having to surrender the fact that I can't control COVID. I can't
Yeah.
control what one band does, or what another person does, or there's so much that's out of my control that I have to surrender. And so I feel, I guess, through all of that, there's just so much gratitude that I feel a sense of togetherness. Like, we're going to power through this together. We're going to figure out how to deliver the safest, best, most exhilarating return of Furnace Fest ever. But we're going to do it together, and we're not going to leave anybody out. And so that's been the mission from the start, and still is. And yeah, you just caught a Chad ramble, and I did not intend to go into all things COVID, but hey, we're here now, so
Yeah, it's still affecting us on a daily basis. So,
it
of
is.
course, we're going to talk about it. And
Yeah,
I can imagine, especially on your end, planning a festival, even without COVID, like even before 2020,
yeah,
was stressful. There's a lot of moving parts. There's
for
a lot of
sure.
bands coming in and out, dropping, adding, and you got to get all this stuff, done. And then you add COVID to the mix, and you're right. There's no easy right or wrong answers. There's no like,
Yeah,
oh, we'll just do this and that'll solve that, because it's
yeah,
changing on a day-to-day basis. So it is very tricky.
yeah. And I think that is the perfect summary for where we're at right now. It's like we're watching. It's like we're watching the horizon, and we know there's a storm, and we know it's bad, and we know it's doing damage. It's just a question of like, well, how many precautions do we take in addition to the ones we're already taking, and how far as a nation do we go, and how much progress do we make? And so it's kind of, even though maybe it's frustrating to realize that this in many ways could have been avoided, it feels like, okay, well, at least it seems like the messaging is getting through, and that people are reacting and are responding, and that as a festival, we're looking ahead at days where, hopefully
Yeah.
September 24th is like, okay, this, whoo, the wave's over, and it all worked out. But yeah, I mean, I never would have imagined when we were given this opportunity to relaunch Furnace Fest that we would be dealing with a global pandemic, in addition to everything you just described.
Yeah.
All the challenges of putting on um, a festival that wants to be a professional endeavor. I mean, Furnace Fest, to be completely frank, was a completely DIY, underground, no clue what we're doing, like no, hardly any contracts, hardly any like significant guarantees. Um, I mean, no, no security teams. Like there are just so many pieces of the original Furnace Fest. There definitely were no barricades. That's why when Andrew WK played, it was like, well, everyone can naturally storm the stage because who's going to stop you? There's no barricades. There's no security. Like, so to me now, this Furnace Fest will be the real test. Like, okay, now there's a real security team. Now there probably won't be barricades on main stage, but main stage is like taller. So it's like, I mean, man, dude, my hope, my confidence is with the crowd that they're going to be able to make it on stage, but they're going to have some additional challenges this time.
I love it. I love it. And I do think it's so cool because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, obviously emo, post-hardcore in like the 90s and the 80s was, it was born, it was relevant, but it wasn't like popular, like mainstream. And I think that you were one of the figures that was kind of at the forefront of when it started to get popular. Bands like Thursday, Under Oath, that like actually brought it into like the very public eye of like, average just rock fans liking bands like this. And now it's almost fitting that like, when Furnace Fest was first starting, it was DUI because the scene was almost DUI. And now it's like, after all the push, it's starting to, you know,
I mean, absolutely, dude. We are like skating in on the coattails of all of everyone else's hard work. We let everybody else work really, really hard for 20 years, and then we just showed up. And we're like, okay, sold out. Tickets are 10 times what they used to be. Thank you, everybody. No, it's true. I mean, it's like back then, even the biggest of the bands, excuse me, that now are cool to say, we had Dillinger Escape Plan, we had Bane, we had Newfound Glory, we had all these bands. It's like back then they just weren't. I mean, Hatebreed was playing at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Newfound Glory is like 4. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the original flyers, it's just crazy. But it was the reality of so many of those bands were starting and not necessarily or hadn't even come close to reaching the levels that they have. So,
but I think the original Furnace Fest was like such a legendary staple that it gave those bands a platform. I can't think
right.
of any other festival, even like now, never mind back then, that would give Newfound Glory and Hatebreed like the same, like in the same festival, kind of like,
yeah, and that
because
was
they're so different.
right, and that was part of, I guess part of that was my desire to include everybody, both stylistically, from a faith perspective, because I was a promoter working with a lot of Christian artists in the South at a time where it was like your parents would drop you off at church to go see a concert because it was like, okay, at least you're like going to church. But they're definitely not going to drop you off at the little like shady venue that Hot Water Music is playing at down the street,
Yeah.
So and then there was I feel like there was this like opposite end, which is like, oh, there, from a mainstream perspective, it was like, oh, well, why would we ever go to a church to see bands? Like that's just weird. And so Furnace Fest, I think, had this like occupied this space and time where we were given the gift of like, hey, what if we just all came together for a weekend, regardless of how we sound, what we sound like, what we believe, how we view politics, what our stance is on food, or I mean, because back then it was like, so like, dude, are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? Wait, you eat meat? Like, I mean, there were so many angles that I feel we could take that it was kind of like a breath of fresh air to just be like, well, that band did just very boldly preach the gospel of Jesus from stage. And I'm sure that there were people in the crowd who were very offended by that. But here we are all together, giving each other a voice and an opportunity to share what we believe is important and what we believe what we're passionate about. And so I think now, now looking back, it's like, oh, that was kind of genius. But
Yeah.
really, it was just like, how do we learn from each other, and how do we grow from each other, and how do I take in information from someone that sees the world completely differently than I do, and maybe they vice versa for them, and but here we are, we're sharing the same stages and drinking the same stage water and eating the same, like backstage pasta and pizza. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard not to recognize that we're all in this thing together. And I do think that that's been maybe the aspect to Furnace Fest that's been most compelling, because of how divisive and divided this world that we are living in right now, especially in America, is. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful opportunity.
And I know, like you mentioned, how there were such clear categories of like,
Yeah.
do you eat meat? Are you vegetarian? Even musically speaking, like I actually got to interview Jeff from Thursday, and
Oh, cool.
I talked to him about how, like, when Thursday was first starting out, you were metal, you were punk, you were emo, and that's what you
Yep.
were. You didn't cross genres, you didn't intersect. That was just the lines were the way they were. And I think even like again for Furnace Fest to give bands like Thursday that did blend the genres kind of a platform to really voice their music. That's super awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it just kind of goes back to the original vision, and I guess, eh, once again, it's like there wasn't a vision. I mean, well, there was, but there wasn't. It wasn't like we sat down and like wrote out on a piece of paper, like, hey, the manifesto of Furnace Fest, or the mission statement is this. It just happened. It was like we were all there in that moment and in that time and that space, and it just kind of naturally oozed out of what we were all experiencing. And now 20 years later, it sounds so great and so cool and so like,
Yeah.
whoa, what a great vision statement you had. You were so strategic. And it's like, nope, absolutely. We had no clue what we were doing, but it was a
Yeah.
blast. And I know this, yeah, this is gonna be an event for the records, and that was the goal, like, okay, people seem to have very fond memories of what Furnace Fest was. How do we step that up to, and honestly, man, that's probably been the hardest thing with what's currently happening with COVID, is the reality that most people from other countries will not be able to join us this year because of COVID restrictions.
Mm.
And that's, Furnace Fest was, even from its inception, I mean, there may have only been 2 or 3 people from Japan. There may have only been 1 or 2 people from Italy. There may have only been a few Canadians, a few Mexicans, there were only a few people from these other countries, but they were there. And so
Yeah.
it's like there's a part of my heart, from a global perspective, that feels like, oh man. So I don't know. I'm not sure how we fix that. Maybe we have to do this again, just to like to be able to truly include everybody. But that's a problem that has to be somehow remedied.
Yeah, and that kind of actually leads into a question that I had. I was saving it towards the more end, but I'm definitely curious to know since it's kind of hinted at.
Sure.
Obviously, Furnace Fest 2021 is very exciting. Will there be a Furnace Fest 2022? Do you have any plans in mind?
Well, yeah, up until this kind of challenge, no. I mean, the original plan was, it was all the advertising, or quote unquote the branding, you know, the company branding states that this is a one-time resurrection,
Yeah, yeah.
all that's so silly when you just think back about kids trying to bring their friends together and have a great event. But yeah, I mean, we definitely are in conversations at this point over, what would it look like. But I think we're all still in agreement that we have to accomplish what we've told everybody we're going to do, which is deliver a world-class event in
Yeah.
7 weeks from today. So it's like until that happens, it's a little bit like I feel like it's a bit there's a little too much hopium sprinkled in on like, well, 2022 is going to be even better, and it's like, yeah, let's just make sure we pull off the first one, and then we can
Yeah.
start,
Be
really
here
thinking.
now
But
kind of thing.
right, yeah, let's enjoy the moment. But there is, I definitely feel this like pain point for all of our international friends,
Yeah.
and that just is yeah, yeah, it's definitely something I want to tackle.
Definitely, definitely. And again, for all of our WSU listeners listening in, that's Friday, September 24th to Sunday, September 26th. Again, first headliner Under Oath, second Taking Back Sunday, third Killswitch Engage. All three bands that we play at WSU very regularly. So chances are, if you're listening to this interview over the air on YouTube, this is something you're definitely going to want to check out. Again, thank you so much again for talking with me today, Chad. I really, really
Oh, of
appreciate it.
course.
I've got one more question for you today, and
Sure.
I'm dying to know the answer to this. So, you used to obviously work at like a record label, Take Hold
Hmm.
Records. You kind of helped
Hmm.
sign and gain a lot of popularity to these bands, not just through Furnace Fest, but through signing and pushing bands. And even bands like Further Seems Forever. They're playing at Furnace Fest. Another band that
Yeah.
when I saw, I had to double take because I was like, no way. As one of the biggest Chris Carrabba fans you'll ever meet, and like just loving all those First and Forever songs, like from way back when he
Hmm.
was in the band, even now, like when he's out of the band, all of the incredible stuff. But yeah, when you're signing a band, what do you look for?
Oh man, that's great. I have not been asked that question in years, and I haven't really thought about that question in years. To me, that it was always pretty simple. I was looking for repetition, and what I mean by that is I was so maybe the better way to say it is I was looking for muscle memory of my mind. And so when I would listen to a song, if I had listened to it, especially only one time, and later that day or the next day or whatever, I would find myself humming or singing back a line or a chorus or a part or thinking of that part, it was like, that's when I knew it. I was like, okay, clearly they have done something right. But, and of course, once that kind of bar was met, then from there, I think it was like, well, looking at the story, like what's the story? Is there already connection with other bands that are part of this? And when bands like Under Oath are telling me that I should check out this band called Beloved, or I should check out a band called Terminal, or any number of bands that they essentially brought to me or kind of confirmed to me, it was like that added, like, okay, now it's not just me thinking from my high horse in Birmingham or Seattle or wherever I was, that this is good. This is friends who are saying this is good, and there's something the story here is cool, and is worth looking into and investing in. So yeah, that was it.
Awesome. And I love that. I love that description because there's so many times where I listen to a song, and even if I'm not super like the first listen loving it, if it gets stuck in my head, I will love it. Like that's the thing is,
Yeah,
well, once the earworm gets in there, it's old.
it's set. No, it's
Oh,
amazing. It's true. It's funny how that works, but I do feel like that's how it is for many of us, and how we fall in love with songs and with artists, and any number of things. It's like, oh, I'm thinking about that. I'm singing that. Oh, that's really cool. Wait, I want more of that. It's like it's like dopamine, like flashing up in the brain. Like, oh, I need a, I
exactly.
need a, I need another hit.
Well, thank you so much again for talking with me today. This has been an
Of
absolutely
course,
incredible
and thank you.
conversation. I personally am so excited for Furnace Fest. I know a lot of people out there that are too. And for all of our WSU listeners, if you like bands like August Burns Red that we play, like in all of our categories, if you like bands like Thursday, come down September 24th to
Yeah.
26th. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
we
again,
still have
Chad.
a few tickets available, so they're almost gone, but yeah, they're still there for now.
Act fast, act fast.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, yeah.